We have talked about all the pieces of Revelation, all the different structural components, all the chapters, except for the postludes. So now we need to do the postludes. Our ultimate goal is getting into chapter 13. So let's leave the postlude of the 7 trumpets to get there as our final goal, and let's look for now at the postlude to the 7 bowls, which in some ways, again, is instructive, just like the interlude for the 7 seals was instructive. The postlude for the 7 bowls in some ways makes it pretty easy on us to see the connection between what follows. So the wrong place. The 7th bowl, the last of the bowls, pouring out the golden bowls, the prayers of God's people. The 7th angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." The 7 bowls complete the wrath of God, and this is the 7th of those bowls. It is done. And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell on heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. And then right after this mention of God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drink the cup of his fury, and Babylon falls. So you've got 2 chapters about what? About Babylon the Great. 2 full chapters. One chapter basically describing Babylon the Great, and then one chapter about her fall, which is just what the 7th seal had already said happened, but in a much more expanded format. Now this makes sense. This is both what we saw with the interludes and what we're starting to see with the postludes makes sense from a literary standpoint. If you're saying something and you mention the word Babylon, you don't necessarily want to put it in parentheses. People are saying, "What's this Babylon that you're talking about?" You don't want to put it in parentheses and then a 2-chapter diversion, close parentheses, and then finish what you're saying about the 7th bowl. Oftentimes, in ordinary speech, in public speaking, in preaching, in writing, you say the bumper sticker version of what you want to say. God remembered Babylon the Great and made her drink the wine. And some people aren't quite sure what you're talking about, but just the bumper sticker short summary. And then later on you can get, now let's go back to, remember that Babylon that I mentioned? I'll give you 2 chapters to expand on what this Babylon was and what it means for her to drink the cup of God's wrath. Very common literary communication device is to just say say in brief what needed to be said. Then you can expand upon it later, and that's what the postludes. That's what the postludes do. We get through where the mention of Babylon the Great, but let's just finish talking. Right now we're talking about the bowls. So let's finish talking about the 7th bowl. Get through the 7th bowl, and now we can go back and expound upon Babylon the Great and her fall and her drinking of the fury of God's wrath. So clearly, chapter 17 through 18, it's all about Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes, her relationship to the beast. That's interesting. We'll have to look at that later when we talk more about beasts. And her fall. Fallen is Babylon. Come out of Babylon, my people. She thought that she would never die. She's a queen. She would never mourn. But she was killed. The kings of the earth mourn over her. We're still talking about Babylon. This is all from the 7th bowl. The merchants of the earth mourn over Babylon because they're not getting their profits anymore, their wealth. The saints and apostles are rejoicing over Babylon. Still explicitly talking about Babylon, in case you might have missed it. And then going into chapter 19, we saw the saints, the multitude in heaven, the holy ones of God, and the whole heavenly council, the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures, worship God and praise God for the fall of Babylon. How do I know they're specifically talking about the Babylon? The smoke from her goes up forever and ever. Who's her? Babylon is the what we've been talking about with female nouns, the prostitute, woman, Babylon. And the smoke of her goes up forever and ever. What smoke of her? There was the smoke of her burning, right? Verse 18 in chapter 18. They saw the smoke of her burning. So Babylon is burning, smoke is rising up, and that's what the whole heavenly assembly is praising God for. So all the way from 17 to the first half of chapter 19, it's all about Babylon and her fall. Now, I'm inclined to keep as we keep going through the rest of the book, we're just continuing to unfold this thread of, okay, now that Babylon has fallen, now the wedding feast of the Lamb and the bride can commence. If somebody, as I said, there's different ways to outline Revelation. I don't think there's one that's right and others wrong. If you want to start a new section in chapter 19, and maybe say that there's 7 visions here, 7 things that John sees or hears, or a new cycle of heavenly vision followed by earthly consequences, and then the relationship between heaven and earth being consummated in heaven and earth being united as one. Sure, that's, I'd be okay with making this into another section. But for now, let me just present how I think this keeps going. We've been talking about the fall of Babylon. When Babylon has fallen, Jesus is not going to marry a prostitute. He's been waiting for his bride, New Jerusalem, to be fully ready, and he's been waiting for his people to come out of Babylon. He's not going to marry his bride as long as some of his people are in Babylon. His bride is not ready. He's called them to come out. When they've come out to such an extent that they are indeed rejoicing that Babylon has fallen because they are fully loyal and devoted to King Jesus alone, then the bride has made herself ready, and the preparations for and the wedding itself can commence. So I think we're continuing on the same storyline. The fall of Babylon leads directly into the marriage supper of the Lamb. The bride has made herself ready. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So now we're fully on our seat, anticipating the bride is ready. The angel is announcing that the marriage supper is coming. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper. If I had been writing the book of Revelation, glad that I didn't. I would have expected here, or just reading through it, I would have expected, okay, next, immediately we see the marriage supper, or the wedding of the Lamb. Now we do see it pretty soon. If we skip to chapter 21, we heard the bride was ready. Blessed are those invited to the wedding supper. And then right away in chapter 21, I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her. Oh, it's hard to highlight with this trackpad. Prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. God and man are dwelling together. God doesn't dwell with a girlfriend, he dwells with a bride. The wedding of the Lamb has come, and indeed it shows shortly thereafter. I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. The marriage has commenced, been consummated. God and his bride happily ever after. Perfect, exquisite intimacy, joy, domestic tranquility and union. So if we could have jumped from chapter 19, verse 9, the announcement of the marriage supper, to 21, we've got again a continuous flow of the story. The bride has made herself ready. She's come out of Babylon. His people have come out of Babylon. The bride is ready. Marriage supper. And now we have the wedding of the bride and groom. So a continuous story. If only we could cut out the second half of chapter 19 through 20. But of course, God is wiser than my suggested edits. And so it makes sense that whatever happens in the second half of 19 and chapter 20 fits in with this story. But what I want to point out is that you have this continuous flow all the way from the seventh bowl to the end of the book is a continuous story, if we can account for the second half of 19 and chapter 20. A continuous flow of the story of God remembered Babylon the Great and poured out the cup of her wrath. The nations fell. The great city fell. We get a description of the fall of Babylon. His people have come out of Babylon. So they are in fact rejoicing as her smoke rises up. The bride has made herself ready. It's time for there's no more Babylon. There's no more prostitute. She's been destroyed. So what you've got is the fullness of the New Jerusalem bride. So it's time for the wedding supper, and then we move 21 on into the great wedding of the bride and the groom. But nice continuous story all the way from the seventh bowl to the end and the consummation of the bride and the lamb. We just have to come back and account for that 1.5 chapters that we skipped over.